Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Cyprus Forum London 2026, an initiative born out of the collaboration between the Cyprus High Commission with Oxygen for Democracy, a Cyprus-based non-governmental organization committed to strengthening democratic participation, transparency, and informed policymaking. Over the past 3 years, this partnership has continued to grow and strengthen, creating a meaningful platform for dialogue on issues of shared importance for the Cyprus-UK relationship, including to highlight the contribution of the Cypriot diaspora in the UK and to showcase Cyprus's role in its region, the Eastern Mediterranean, at the southernmost edge of the European Union. This year's edition brings together policymakers, current and former decision makers with first-hand experience navigating periods of geopolitical and societal uncertainty, alongside diplomats, academics, and security experts from both the public and private sectors, to examine one of the defining security challenges of our time, hybrid threats and the resilience of democratic societies. As hybrid operations evolve in sophistication and scale, from cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns to strategic coercion and attacks on critical infrastructure, international cooperation and trusted partnerships have become more important than ever. Turning to today's program, it is my pleasure to invite our opening speakers, His Excellency Dr. Kyriakos Kouros, High Commissioner of the Republic of Cyprus to the United Kingdom, followed by His Excellency Pedro Serrano, Ambassador of the European Union to the United Kingdom. Please, Ambassador.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad that I see a lot of familiar faces, and first of all, the Minister of Defense of Cyprus, Vasilis Palmas, who was also a great friend of mine in my previous capacities. I'm also very glad, apart from the Excellencies Ambassadors of the European Union I have here with us today, that I have the honor of Pedro Serrano, a good friend of mine. Unfortunately, he's very close to his departure from this post, and it will be the Brits will miss him mostly, and especially those who want to join again the European Union. I'm also very happy that I have here a former commissioner to the European Union, the Cyprus Commissioner for Health and Food Safety, Stella Kyriakidis, whom she's also a prominent personality also in Cyprus, not only in the European Union. And also I'm very glad that I have a former Minister of Justice of Cyprus here, also a good friend of mine. Thank you, her, for being here and also in her new capacity actively supporting the High Commission's endeavors together with the Cyprus Forum today. I will stop here. I don't need to name everyone, with one exception. Because, you know, although I'm a career diplomat, I spent 10 years, almost 10 years of my life in the intelligence community, so I have to acknowledge the presence of the director of INTSEN, Daniel Markić. We met with him when he was a Croatian counterpart of mine, when I was head of intelligence of Cyprus, and I appreciate the time he found to be here with us. Building partnership to counter hybrid threats. It's some time now that I stopped using that cliche that we are living in interesting times, because unfortunately with the current state of global affairs, it's sometimes if it's not dramatic, I would say we are living in ridiculous times. I'm still following social truth to know what the new American policy is on various affairs. So, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Cyprus High Commission for a day of engaging and thought-provoking discussion. This year's Cyprus Forum London coincides with Cyprus' presidency of the Council of the European Union. The guiding principles of the Cypriot presidency is an autonomous union open to the world, a vision that reflects the spirit of today's deliberations and the importance of partnerships with like-minded countries such as the United Kingdom. It is also a pleasure to acknowledge the support of the EU delegation to the United Kingdom and my good friend, as I said before, Ambassador Pedro Serrano, whom I want to personally thank for our seamless cooperation in London over the past months. I would like also to take the opportunity to thank the staff of this diplomatic mission for their work, for the work done, so that we look dignified and able to host this forum, and especially our political counselor, Olivia Dimitriou. Today's panels focus on building partnerships to counter hybrid threats. This is an issue we believe firmly at the top of Europe's agenda. In today's geopolitical environment, hybrid threats affect the European Union, its member states, and the United Kingdom alike, making cooperation not only desirable, as reflected in last year's EU-UK Security and Defence Partnership, but increasingly necessary. Through today's discussions and a follow-up conference later this year, led by the EU delegation, we hope to demonstrate a more practical and tangible pathway for EU-UK cooperation and indeed for Cyprus-UK cooperation as well. It never ceases to amaze me during my almost 40 years of involvement with diplomacy and global affairs how contemporary the works of ancient Greek scholar Thucydides, we call him Thucydides, remain till today. We are talking about a historian and political scientist who lived over 2,400 years ago. In most of his works, Thucydides offers profound frameworks for understanding contemporary hybrid threats too. He illustrates how states exploit ambiguity, subvert societies, and manipulate information. Sounds very temporary. His work draws vital parallels to modern unconventional warfare, revealing that the strategic dynamics of hybrid conflicts are timeless. Hybrid threats are not an abstract concept for Cyprus. They have long constituted a national security challenge for my country. Cyprus' exposure to sustained hybrid pressure has provided it with insight into how such threats manifest through political and economic pressure, social and ideological engineering, strategic dependencies, and intelligence activity. This experience has allowed us to play a constructive role in bolstering Europe's resilience from the very beginning, having contributed meaningfully to the work of the Friends of the Presidency Group on countering hybrid threats established in 2017, adopting for the first time a cross-sector EU-wide approach and EU-NATO cooperation guided by the principles of openness, transparency, inclusiveness, and reciprocity, while fully respecting the autonomy of decision-making of both organizations. Cyprus helped identify indicators, patterns, and early warning signs of hybrid activity relevant to the broader European landscape and in mapping of vulnerabilities affecting both national and pan-European structures and networks. Member states used those indicators and shared their national assessments and experiences to help develop a common European understanding of how hybrid activity manifests across sectors and regions, helping to lay the groundwork for today's horizontal working party of the Council on Enhancing Resilience and Countering Hybrid Threats. Cyprus engages systematically with the EU Hybrid Fusion Cell, particularly regarding developments in the southeastern neighborhood, helping shape further the EU's integrated approach in response to a rapidly evolving threat environment arising from various geographical directions and involving both state and non-state actors. More recently, growing pressure from hybrid activities linked to migration, cyber attacks, and energy security have further highlighted the importance of a reliable partnership within and across Europe. Cyprus stands ready to deepen such cooperation particularly with the United Kingdom, which has a presence in Cyprus, an important European security partner with whom developing also a modern, future-oriented bilateral defense and security cooperation remains a priority. Last Monday, the informal Council of EU Ministers for General Affairs met in Cyprus, where they joined by the UK Minister for the Constitution and European Union Relations, Nick Thomas Simons, in what himself described as a historic first for the UK's participation at this ministerial information since Brexit. The ministers recognized the need for coordinated European responses to hybrid threats, foreign information manipulation and interference, and to the misuse of emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. They further recognized that this is the moment to be strengthening EU-UK information sharing, coordination in multilateral fora, and improving democratic resilience, including through the European Democracy Shield and the recently launched European Centre for Democratic Resilience. Recently as well, reflection on the operationalization of Article 42.7 of the Treaty of the European Union on Solidarity and Mutual Assistance gained renewed attention within the broader context of the March 2025 European Council discussion on European defence and security, where our leaders reaffirmed the importance of strengthening the Union's defence readiness and strategic autonomy. For Cyprus, this discussion is particularly pertinent given our long-standing experience of hybrid pressure and the importance we attach to European solidarity as one of the member states facing both a conventional and full-spectrum symmetric and asymmetric security threat outside of a collective military alliance. We are outside of a collective military alliance to the moment. With this in mind, I look forward to listening closely to our distinguished speakers and the panelists. We will later have the opportunity of hearing the closing keynote address by the UK FCDO Minister of State for Europe, Stephen Doughty. Please join me now in welcoming to the podium the Ambassador of the European Union to the United Kingdom, a dear friend Pedro Serrano, for his remarks. I wish you a day of thoughtful and engaging conversation. Thank you very much.
Dear High Commissioner, dear Kyriakos, dear Minister of Defense, dear Stella Kyriakides, former Commissioner, dear colleagues, I have to salute as well my colleague from the INSEN, Director of the INSEN. Oh, there you are. And of course, all of you, and of course, fellow ambassadors that are here. What a pleasure and an honor to be here this morning. Many thanks for your very nice words, Kyriakos. I can only say that these, not only the months that I've been working with you during the very successful, I have to say, presidency of the European Council of Cyprus, but since you arrived in this post, working with you has been a true pleasure, and the camaraderie that we have shared and the way we try to push forward a common EU agenda, which is also an UK agenda, because this is about a European agenda, which is the big challenge that we are in reality facing. But you've done a great job since you arrived. You've done a great job also during the months of presidency. Events such as this really help to showcase the importance of the European Union in addressing security issues, in addressing the challenges that we're facing as an international community. So big thanks, and thanks for your warm also friendship that I really cannot but reciprocate, and that really moves me. So many thanks, Kyriakos. I will say a few words because there are so many experts here that I think I should keep my remarks to the minimum. I see we talk very often about hybrid threats. I think it's about hybrid attacks, because the threats have translated most of the time into real challenges that we have to address. If one were to try to find a definition for hybrid threats, the first thing is the intent. And the intent and the goal is to disrupt the normal functioning of a state, and thereby creating distrust in state institutions and fear in the population that will have this distrust and reject a state institution. So that is the very damaging and terrible intent. It's very interesting to remark how, of course, the two more elements are very important. The fact that the authorship of the threat or attack is concealed. So part of the object is that it is not clear who is launching this attack. And the fourth, and that's the most challenging one, is the multiplicity of forms that this may take. When I first became confronted really with the hybrid issue was and called hybrid and its all its complexity is working in 2014, 2015 and as Deputy Secretary General for Security and Defense and participating in meetings of the Hybrid Action Task Force in the Commission. And in this Hybrid Action Task Force, you had all the departments of the Commission, all the sectors of activity of the state, of the society were present. And I have to say, we had very long meetings. Everybody had something useful to say and something important to say, which shows actually the big challenge of how can you coordinate actions in such a variety of fields. And indeed, the actions can come anywhere. It can come of cyber, definitely very important, information manipulation, very important, but it can affect any kind of infrastructures, from hospitals to energy, to whatever that can be disrupted through these threats. Migration is weaponized as well. We saw this in Belarus and the border between Belarus and Poland, where migrants were being pushed, also in Finland and Russia. So to create again destabilization in societies, we see this with the boats that drag their anchors and disrupt, try to disrupt pipelines or communication system. So the really that we can see it also, of course, in weaponization as well of trade and other things. So the realm of hybrid threats or attacks is really the action of the state, and this makes it very challenging. And I was very happy to hear you refer to Thucydides. I cannot pronounce it as you said, and I think if you would tell me the Greek name without giving all the precedents, I would not have identified which author you were referring to. But definitely this hybrid heads have always existed, and hybrid challenges and attacks have always existed. From the time of the Greeks and even before that. But of course, I know that everything we do, say, or think has a Greek origin. I pay tribute to that Greek origin. But in reality, I think we've come more aware of the need to address this in a systematic way. First, it was with the war against terror, and all the using of the of internet to try to mobilize fighters and radicalize people. That was a very important first step. And then I think the other big landmark, in my view, was 2014 and obviously the invasion of Crimea by Russia, and a very systematic. Not only the fact that the little green man that at the beginning people claim not to know where they came from, but even further, all the kinds of attacks that Russia was already launching against our societies that became very, very obvious. And I think it was after that this action task force from the Commission on Hybrid Threats was launched. But indeed, our societies in a way have become a bit more vulnerable to these kind of attacks because of their interconnectedness, because of globalization, because of the cyber world. And I can only imagine and fear how AI, on the one hand, may help us respond to some of these threats. At the same time, it also multiplies the level of threat. And in its response, we follow four main lines. And the first one is awareness. We have to know that these attacks are happening. We have to denounce these facts as much as possible. We even have to attribute authorship of these facts. And attribution has always been a very key and very delicate part of the response. But for awareness, we've been developing instruments within the European Union. Very glad the director of INCEN is here. He will be talking about the hybrid fusion cell that INCEN run. INCEN is the intelligence center in the European Union, and it has representatives of all the intelligence services of EU member states. So the intelligence is shared, is fused, and the necessary level of awareness is kept in the EU institutions thanks to the INSEN. And having a dedicated hybrid fusion cell is a very important step. Also within the EAS, we created an EU versus disinfo department, and we monitor media and press, and particularly focusing on some areas. Now, as you can imagine, Russia is a key area. Whatever comes from there, or from which can come from anywhere, by the way, because Russian disinfo can come from the other end of the world as well. But this is monitored and followed by the EU precisely to raise awareness. Second response is resilience. And resilience, for that, we have to ensure the security of our infrastructures, key infrastructures. We have to secure as maximum the use of our cyber world and domain. And very important steps have been taken by the Commission in this regard through legislation. And also measures to ensure that we are as secure as possible in our infrastructure. Then we have a direct ways of responding to these hybrid threats, and we have created different instruments within the European Union. I'm sure that my friend from INSEN will refer to this, the hybrid response teams, which are teams that can be mobilized in member states. They're already pre-identified, that can be sent to a state that is under attack from hybrid, can be sent also to other countries, and we've sent to other countries, notably to Moldova and Armenia, in order to support them at very difficult times. We've even created secure and defense policy missions that are now, and we have one of them in Moldova, which is very important, to help advise the state and adopt the necessary measures to protect it against hybrid challenges and disinformation, which is suffering very, very heavily, as you know. We have also developed a rapid alert system. I should have started with this one, and particularly for election tampering and the pre-election campaigns. So we know when just to monitor and be able to advise if there's a lot of negative influence that's been sent. And finally, we have a sanctions regime as well, and we are imposing sanctions. We have a specific regime dedicated also to challenges coming from Russia. And final point is partnerships. And partnerships are essential. We are all, many of us are suffering the same types of threats and challenges. Working with NATO, a NATO-EU partnership on hybrid threats is a very important part. But also through the security and defense partnerships, a very important part is also addressing the response to the hybrid challenges. And we have, of course, a security and defense partnership with the United Kingdom, and we are working very closely with the United Kingdom in addressing these challenges. So I think I've spoken already too long. You will be discussing these issues with people that really know about them in this morning. I wish you a very fruitful seminar. Again, a huge thanks to you, Kyriakos, to the Cypriot High Commission, and very proud and to be sponsoring as well this Cyprus Forum in London, addressing the issue of hybrid attacks and threats. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ambassadors, for those opening reflections. We now move to our keynote address. Cyprus has long stood at the crossroads of geopolitical developments in the Eastern Mediterranean and brings a unique perspective on resilience, security, and strategic cooperation in confronting hybrid threats. It is my honor to welcome Vasilis Palmas, Minister of Defense of the Republic of Cyprus. For the speech, you may use the equipment that you found on your chairs. For channel 1 is for English and channel 2 is for the Greek.
Good morning to everyone. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, με ιδιαίτερη χαρά συμμετέχω στο τρίτο ετήσιο Cyprus Forum London, μια πρωτοβουλία που αναδεικνύει τη σημασία του διαλόγου και της συνεργασίας σε ένα ολοένα και πιο σύνθετο περίπλοκο και ρευστό περιβάλλον ασφάλειας. Η θεματική της φετινής διοργάνωσης Building Partnership to Counter Hybrid Threats δίδει μια πρώτη τάξεως ευκαιρία για συζήτηση των θεμάτων που άπτονται των υβριδικών απειλών, καθώς και της ανάγκης ενίσχυσης του συντονισμού μεταξύ κρατών, θεσμών και διεθνών οργανισμών. Σε ένα περιβάλλον όπου οι απειλές είναι διασυνοριακές, πολυεπίπεδες, κανένα κράτος δεν μπορεί να τις αντιμετωπίσει με αποτελεσματικό τρόπο μόνο του. Στο σύγχρονο πόλεμο που διεξάγεται σήμερα, όπου η τεχνολογία είναι ικανή να προσφέρει τις πληροφορίες που απαιτούνται στο πεδίο της μάχης, οι υβριδικές απειλές βρήκαν πρόσφορο έδαφος για να αναπτυχθούν. Στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, οι υβριδικές απειλές αποτελούν ένα σύνθετο φάσμα απειλών, οι οποίες συνδυάζουν συμβατικά και μη συμβατικά μέσα. Και αυτό γιατί βασίζονται στην ασάφεια, στη σταδιακή συσσόρευση αποτελεσμάτων και στη δυσκολία απόδοσης ευθύνης. Τα τελευταία χρόνια, οι εξωγενείς παρεμβολές, γνωστές στο ευρωπαϊκό πλαίσιο ως FIMI, και οι επιχειρήσεις επιρροής και παραπληροφόρησης αποτελούν τον κύριο εργαλείο αποσταθεροποίησης μέσω κοινωνικών δικτύων, παραπλανητικών αφηγημάτων και προσπαθειών χειραγώγησης των εκλογικών διαδικασιών των κρατών μελών και εταίρων στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Παρά όμως το γεγονός ότι μπορούν να προκαλέσουν αναστάτωση και ευνηδιασμό σε τακτικό επίπεδο, ο στρατηγικός του στόχος δεν είναι αυτός. Από τις επιχειρήσεις παραπληροφόρησης και τις κυβερνοεπιθέσεις έως το οικονομικό και ενεργειακό εξαναγκασμό και την εργαλειοποίηση μεταναστευτικών ροών, όλες οι μορφές υβριδικών απειλών συγκλίνουν στον ίδιο στρατηγικό στόχο. Αυτός δεν είναι το άμεσο πλήγμα, αλλά η φθορά. Μέσω της καλλιέργειας της αμφιβολίας, στοχεύουν στη δημιουργία σύγχυσης και στη σταδιακή και συστηματική διάβρωση της εμπιστοσύνης. Το αποτέλεσμα είναι η αποδυνάμωση της κοινωνικής συνοχής, η υπονόμευση του δημόσιου διαλόγου και τελικά η φθορά της ίδιας της δημοκρατικής λειτουργίας. Άμεσος στόχος δεν είναι μόνο οι θεσμοί, αλλά πρωτίστως η αντίληψη των πολιτών για αυτούς. Ιδιαιτέρως ευάλωτα σε αυτές τις απειλές είναι τα μικρά δημοκρατικά κράτη. Όχι επειδή είναι αδύναμα, αλλά επειδή είναι εκτεθειμένα, εξαρτώνται από τη διεθνή αξιοπιστία τους, διαθέτουν θεσμικές ευαισθησίες και λειτουργούν μέσα σε ένα περιβάλλον υψηλής διαφάνειας. Αυτό τα καθιστά πιο ευάλωτα σε στρατηγικές που στοχεύουν στην αξιοπιστία και στη συνοχή τους. Ασφαλώς, η δυναμική που έχουν οι υβριδικές απειλές δεν προέκυψε ευνηδιαστικά. Αν και ο όρος είναι σχετικά πρόσφατος, το φαινόμενο που περιγράφει έχει βαθιές ιστορικές ρίζες. Κατά τη διάρκεια του ψυχρού πολέμου, πολλές πρακτικές υβριδικού πολέμου ήταν ήδη σε κρίση κυρίως μέσω της προπαγάνδας των μυστικών επιχειρήσεων και του ιδεολογικού ανταγωνισμού. Στη μεταψυχροπολεμική περίοδο, οι συγκρούσεις στα Βαλκάνια ανέδειξαν χαρακτηριστικά που σήμερα συνδέονται με τον υβριδικό πόλεμο, ιδίως σε ό,τι αφορά στο ρόλο της πληροφορίας και της χειραγώγησης της κοινής νόμης ως πολλαπλασιαστών ισχύως. Σήμερα, κυρίως λόγω της ανάπτυξης της τεχνολογίας, της ταχύτητας διάχυσης της πληροφορίας, της διαθήκης των κοινωνικών και της αυξανόμενης γεωπολιτικής ρευστότητας, οι προκλήσεις είναι διασυνοριακές και πολυεπίπεδες και οι υβριδικές απειλές έχουν αποκτήσει νέα ένταση και στρατηγική σημασία. Τα εργαλεία που χρησιμοποιούνται στο πλαίσιο του υβριδικού πολέμου είναι πολλά και εξελίσσονται διαρκώς. Μεταξύ άλλων, οι κυβερνοεπιθέσεις, η παραπληροφόρηση και τα deepfakes, το οργανωμένο έγκλημα, η τρομοκρατία, η οικονομική και ενεργειακή πίεση, οι δολιοφθορές σε κρίσιμες υποδομές, η χειραγώγηση των μέσων κοινωνικής δικτύωσης, ακόμα και η εργαλειοποίηση μεταναστευτικών και προσφυγικών ροών με σκοπό την υπονόμευση του αντιπάλου. Πρόσφατα, οι απειλές αυτές μετεξελίχθηκαν ως παραβιάσεις με μη επανδρομένα αεροσκάφη UAVs στον εναέριο χώρο κρατών μελών, όπως η Λιθουανία, η Γερμανία, το Βέλγιο και η Δανία. Ταυτόχρονα, οι απειλές κατακρίσιμων υποδομών εκτείνονται πλέον στα υποθαλάσσια καλώδια, τα ενεργειακά δίκτυα και τις αλυσίδες εφοδιασμού. Σε ένα τέτοιο πλαίσιο, ο πόλεμος λαμβάνει χώρα σε ποικίλα περιβάλλοντα, χαρακτηρίζεται από ασύμμετρες τακτικές και τεχνικές και παράγει αποτελέσματα σε πολλαπλά επίπεδα. Τίποτα ασφαλώς από αυτά τα μέσα δεν είναι καινούριο από μόνο του. Αυτό που είναι νέο είναι η συνδυασμένη, συγχρονισμένη και στρατηγικά κατευθυνόμενη χρήση τους. Σε αυτό το πλαίσιο η Κύπρος αποτελεί χαρακτηριστική περίπτωση. Σε ό,τι αφορά την Κύπρο, η χώρα μας λόγω της γεωγραφικής της θέσης αντιμετωπίζει ένα ιδιαίτερο σύνθετο υβριδικό περιβάλλον, με τις υβριδικές απειλές να περιλαμβάνουν στοχευμένες κυβερνοεπιθέσεις, εκστρατείες παραπληροφόρησης και προσπάθειες εξωγενών παρεμβάσεων μέσω της εργαλειοποίησης ρητορικών που αφορούν ζητήματα διαφθοράς, αλλά και τις προκλήσεις που συνδέονται με την ενεργειακή ασφάλεια και της κατάστασης στην Ανατολική Μεσόγειο και τη Μέση Ανατολή. Η συνεχιζόμενη για 52 χρόνια κατοχή μέρους του εδάφους από την Τουρκία, σε συνδυασμό με πολιτικές, οικονομικές και πληροφοριακές πιέσεις, καθιστούν τη χώρα ένα πεδίο στο οποίο οι υβριδικές τακτικές δοκιμάζονται στην πράξη. Τα τελευταία χρόνια η Κύπρος έχει αντιμετωπίσει νέες υβριδικές πιέσεις. Έχουμε δει τη μετανάστευση να εργαλειοποιείται, κυβερνοεπιθέσεις σε κρίσιμες υποδομές και μοτίβα παραπληροφόρησης. Αυτά συνδέονται με αφηγήματα που αμφισβητούν τη διεθνή νομιμότητα, ενισχύουν τις υφιστάμενες διαιρέσεις και επιδιώκουν να τις επηρεάσουν τις προοπτικές προόδου στο Κυπριακό. Παρ' όλα αυτά, η γεωπολιτική μας θέση στο σταυροδρόμι της Ευρώπης, της Μέσης Ανατολής και της Βόρειας Αφρικής μας θέτει στην πρώτη γραμμή και μας καθιστά σημαντικό εταίρο στην αντιμετώπιση αυτών των σύνθετων απειλών. Αυτός είναι και ο λόγος για τον οποίο η Κύπρος έχει ιδιαίτερο έντονο ενδιαφέρον για την ενίσχυση της διεθνούς συνεργασίας στον τομέα της αντιμετώπισης των υβριδικών απειλών. Από τη δική μας εμπειρία, έχουμε αντιληφθεί ότι τα υψηλά επίπεδα ανθεκτικότητας δεν μπορούν να οικοδομηθούν μεμονωμένα ή σε απομόνωση. Η ανθεκτικότητα αποτελεί συλλογικό προϊόν και προϋποθέτει σταθερές συνεργασίες, αμοιβαία εμπιστοσύνη και αποτελεσματικό συντονισμό μεταξύ κρατών και θεσμών. Σε αυτό το πλαίσιο, οφείλουμε να διασφαλίσουμε μια κοινή και διαρκώς επικαιροποιημένη επίγνωση περιβάλλοντος απειλών, ώστε οι αντιδράσεις να είναι έγκαιρες, στοχευμένες και αποτελεσματικές. Καθοριστική σημασίας προς αυτή την κατεύθυνση είναι η ενίσχυση της ανταλλαγής πληροφοριών. Οι πληροφορίες πρέπει να διακινούνται άμεσα, αξιόπιστα και με τρόπο που να επιτρέπει τη λήψη αποφάσεων σε πραγματικό χρόνο. Πρέπει να ενισχυθούν οι μηχανισμοί έγκαιρης προειδοποίησης. Η ικανότητα ανίχνευσης υβριδικών απειλών πριν αυτές κλιμακωθούν αποτελεί καθοριστικό παράγοντα ενίσχυσης του ποσοστού επιτυχούς αντιμετώπισης τους. Αυτό απαιτεί επενδύσεις στην τεχνολογία αλλά και στο ανθρώπινο δυναμικό. Εξίσου κρίσιμη παραμένει η διατήρηση αξιόπιστης αποτρεπτικής ικανότητας. Όσοι καταφεύγουν σε υβριδικές τακτικές συχνά στηρίζονται στη σύγχυση, στις καθυστερήσεις και στην εκτίμηση ότι τα δημοκρατικά συστήματα θα διστάσουν να αντιδράσουν με ταχύτητα και αποφασιστικότητα. Κατά συνέπεια, οφείλουμε να καταστήσουμε σαφές ότι η αντίδραση μας θα είναι ενιαία, αξιόπιστη, με τρόπο που να ενισχύει την αποτροπή στην πράξη. Όσο ισχυρότερη είναι η συνεργασία και ο συντονισμός μας, τόσο περιορίζεται το πεδίο δράσης για εκείνους που επιχειρούν να εκμεταλλευτούν τις γκρίζες ζώνες μεταξύ ειρήνης και σύγκρουσης. Η προστασία των κρίσιμων υποδομών πρέπει να αποτελέσει προτεραιότητα. Η ανθεκτικότητα των ενεργειακών, ψηφιακών, χρηματοπιστωτικών και άλλων σημαντικών συστημάτων είναι θεμελιώδης για τη συνολική ασφάλεια. Με γνώμονα ότι οι υβριδικές απειλές στοχεύουν κυρίως στους πολίτες, τις αντιλήψεις μας, την εμπιστοσύνη μας και την ενότητά μας, η ενίσχυση της κοινωνικής ανθεκτικότητας είναι εξίσου σημαντική. Σε ό,τι αφορά τον συντονισμό σε ευρωπαϊκό επίπεδο, στο Συμβούλιο της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης συστάθηκε η οριζόντια ομάδα εργασίας για την ενίσχυση της ανθεκτικότητας και την αντιμετώπιση των υβριδικών απειλών. Ο στόχος η βελτίωση της ανθεκτικότητας της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης και των κρατών μελών έναντι των υβριδικών απειλών και την ενίσχυση της ανθεκτικότητας των ευρωπαϊκών κοινωνιών στις κρίσεις. Σε αυτή την προσπάθεια, τα μέσα ενημέρωσης, η κοινωνία των πολιτών, ο ιδιωτικός τομέας, η ακαδημαϊκή και εκπαιδευτική κοινότητα, καθώς και άλλοι συναφείς φορείς, διαδραματίζουν καθοριστικό ρόλο στην ενίσχυση της ευαισθητοποίησης, στην υποστήριξη της δημοκρατικής λειτουργίας και στην αντιμετώπιση φαινομένων χειραγώγησης. Ladies and gentlemen, κυρίες και κύριοι, κάποιοι αναλυτές θεωρούν ότι οι υβριδικές απειλές αποτελούν πλέον την κυρίαρχη μορφή αντιπαράθεσης στο σύγχρονο διεθνές περιβάλλον πέραν της ανοιχτής σύγκρουσης. Αν και όπως προανέφερα ιστορικά, η Ευρώπη έχει αντιμετωπίσει ξανά μορφές υβριδικών απειλών, σήμερα το φαινόμενο έχει εξελιχθεί σε μια στρατηγική η οποία εκμεταλλευόμενη την τεχνολογία, τη στενή διασύνδεση των κοινωνιών και τις ευπάθειες των ανοιχτών δημοκρατιών αποσκοπεί στην επίτευξη συγκεκριμένων στρατηγικών στόχων. Σε αυτό το πλαίσιο, η ενίσχυση της συνεργασίας των κρατών αποτελεί αναγκαία προϋπόθεση για τη διασφάλιση της σταθερότητας και της ανθεκτικότητάς τους. Σε αυτό το πλαίσιο, η εταιρική σχέση μεταξύ στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση και του Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου, ιδίως μετά τη συμφωνία του 2025 για την ασφάλεια και την άμυνα, προσφέρει μια σταθερή βάση για την εμβάθυνση της συνεργασίας σε κρίσιμους τομείς όπως η κυβερνοασφάλεια και η ανταλλαγή πληροφοριών. Σε ό,τι αφορά τις προσπάθειες της Κυπριακής Προεδρίας στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση για την ενίσχυση της συλλογικής ανθεκτικότητας κατά των υβριδικών απειλών τον Μάρτιο, το Ευρωπαϊκό Συμβούλιο ενέκρινε συμπεράσματα σχετικά με την προώθηση της ικανότητας της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης να αντιμετωπίζει υβριδικές απειλές, επιβεβαιώνοντας την αποφασιστικότητα της Ένωσης να χρησιμοποιήσει όλα τα διαθέσιμα εργαλεία για την πρόληψη, την αποτροπή και την αντιμετώπιση υβριδικών εκστρατιών που στοχεύουν την Ένωση. Τα κράτη-μέλη και οι εταίροι ανεξάρτητα από την προέλευση και την κλίμακα έντασής τους. Καθώς προετοιμαζόμαστε για τη δεύτερη σύνοδο κορυφής της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου και για μια ακόμη στρατηγική συζήτηση σχετικά με τις υβριδικές απειλές, υπάρχει ενώπιον μας μια σημαντική ευκαιρία να μετατρέψουμε τις πολιτικές μας δεσμεύσεις σε πράξη. Το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο παραμένει βασικός εταίρος ασφάλειας για την Ένωση και η εμβάθυνση της συνεργασίας μαζί του είναι πιο σημαντική από ποτέ, καθώς η αρχιτεκτονική ασφάλειας της Ευρώπης εξελίσσεται. Παρά τη σαφή πρόοδο που έχει σημειωθεί, το εξελισσόμενο αυτό περιβάλλον απειλών παραμένει ιδιαίτερα δυναμικό και πολύπλοκο. Η πρόκληση δεν αφορά μόνο τη διαμόρφωση συνεργασιών και στρατηγικών, αλλά και τη διασφάλιση της επιχειρησιακής αποτελεσματικότητας. Αναδύεται εμπροκειμένου ένα θεμελιώδης ερώτημα στρατηγικής και επάρκειας. Είναι η ευρωπαϊκή αντίδραση πραγματικά προσαρμοσμένη στο σκοπό της? Η απάντηση δεν βρίσκεται σε μια μονοδιάσταση, αλλά στη συνολική ικανότητα συνεργασίας, αποτελεσματικού συντονισμού και συνεχούς προσαρμογής στις εξελισσόμενες απειλές. Πάνω απ' όλα βρίσκεται στη διατήρηση της εμπιστοσύνης. Χωρίς εμπιστοσύνη, καμιά κοινωνία δεν μπορεί να παραμένει ανθεκτική. Θα ήθελα να σας διαβεβαιώσω ότι η Κυπριακή Δημοκρατία είναι πλήρως αφοσιωμένη σε αυτή την κοινή προσπάθεια. Εστιάζουμε στη λήψη πρακτικών μέτρων για τη βελτίωση της αντίδρασης της Ένωσης απέναντι στις υβριδικές απειλές και στην ενίσχυση της συνεργασίας Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης και Ηνωμένου Βασιλείου. Οικοδομώντας ισχυρότερες συνεργασίες, μπορούμε να αντιμετωπίσουμε τις προκλήσεις και συνάμα να ενισχύσουμε τη συλλογική μας ανθεκτικότητα. Με αυτές τις λίγες σκέψεις, εκφράζω τις ευχαριστίες μου στους διοργανωτές του συνεδρίου και εύχομαι κάθε επιτυχία στις εργασίες τους. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Palmas, for those insightful remarks and for underscoring the importance of trust, coordination, and timely information sharing as essential pillars in strengthening our collective resilience against hybrid threats. Turning to our panels, I would like to invite the first panel to take their seats. Their discussion will set the broader geopolitical and strategic context and the wider implications for European and international security. Hybrid threats are not new. We heard about Thucydides. But the methods, technologies, and actors involved continue to evolve rapidly. This session will examine the historic experience, current trends, and manifestations, and provide an insight into effective response strategies. The discussion will be chaired by Anna Goukidis Prokopiou, President of Politia Think Tank and former Minister of Justice and Public Order of the Republic of Cyprus. Joining her on the panel are Jonathan Allen, Director General for Defense and Security at the Forum Commonwealth and Development Office, Daniel Markić, Director of the EU Intelligence and Situation Center in the European External Action Service, Huw Dylan, Reader in Intelligence and International Security at King's College London, and Nicolas Stylianou, the Cyprus National Point of Contact for Hybrid Threats. Anna, the floor is yours. Just
on the evolving nature of hybrid threats. And I will pick up from what the minister has just said. He used the word resilience. And in my mind, at this point in time, this interesting or crazy times, they could pick and choose which definition we prefer. At this point in time, I think it's very important to see security in a more inclusive way. And we do really need to understand the connection between security and resilience. In a time when social cohesion is not a given, in a toxic political environment, where there's a lot of polarization in politics, in the absence of social cohesion, and in the more prominence of cleavages, that's an entry point for hybrid threats. That's an entry point for anyone who has malevolent intentions in mind. And when endogenous resilience doesn't exist in a society, the more susceptible, the more vulnerable that society is to what we're going to be talking about today. And I will start with you. My question to you here is the following. We've been in international relations, we've always talked about hard power. It's quite obvious what hard power is. And then the notion of soft power was introduced, winning hearts and minds. And I'm sure the audience knows what soft power is all about. In the last decade or so, we've seen work on sharp power, which I would say is a reverse notion of soft power in the sense of instead of winning hearts and minds in a benevolent way, sharp power would refer to actually captivating hearts and minds, maybe in a not so benevolent way. Could you talk us through the way that hybrid threats and sharp power have developed in the last decades or so?
Yeah, sure. I'd be delighted to. I'd like to thank everybody for the very warm welcome. There's a lovely venue. I mean, I feel this is a higher risk place to start the conversation because it's a massive topic. I come from a university where we like thinking about big things. I've got a very limited amount of time to cover all these things. So what I'd like to do very, very briefly is to echo some of the points that have been mentioned thus far. And we'll no doubt expand on them over the next 45 minutes or so. And the aspect of this threat that I like to think has been desperately enduring and desperately interesting to study, and something that one perhaps should focus more on, is the idea of subversion. And to my mind, we've got this massive back catalogue of history that we might want to take a very serious look at to try and see what lessons we can draw. Being a historian of the Cold War, this is always naturally where I'm at. You've got this decade-long ideological battle where people have been working desperately hard and desperately vigorous to undermine the other side's sort of political ecosystem, their kind of social cohesion, to try and win without having to actually fight. And so I'd like to just go on to say just two quick things in response to this. The first, is just to reiterate the point that we shouldn't necessarily be drawn or fall into the trap of the shock of the new. This is happening with technology, therefore it must be brand new and super exciting, and there's nothing to learn from the past. Obviously things are new, but we might want to take a look backwards as well. And when we look back to the Cold War, what do we see? Well, at least three things. First of all, that it's a core feature of the conflict. And you can see this right from the start, from the founding documents of the conflict, 1950 and 1668, the founding document of America's Cold War is stamping it there in black and white. Subversion is how they're taking the fight to us. It's what they're about, and this rhetoric bounces on for the next few decades. Second thing we might want to think about from the Cold War is that both sides, all sides, think about it quite carefully, develop doctrine, develop ideas, and build up like an intellectual ecosystem around it. So we see this from George Kennan and in 1948 in the policy planning staff, and we see from various operations that were waged against the West, but also from defectors, how the Soviets kind of systematized and theorized the practice of subversion. So we see this through defectors like Bezmenov, etc., etc. And there is a lot to learn from this about the stages that hostile actors go through in undermining the social cohesion, the political morale, and the moral core of their adversaries. KGB Service A did it back in the day. The SVR, the GRU, and everyone else is doing it today. Third thing from the Cold War is that because this is such a core weapon to the ideological battle, it's well-resourced. It's well-resourced and people take it seriously, and they work hard to take not only their institutions with them, but their societies with them. And that might be something that we can learn from today. Second general point on this before I pipe down is that now, as there, I think we have to recognise that the fight for the ideological and the sort of intellectual high ground has to be fought, it has to be joined, and it has to be waged with energy, enthusiasm, and resource. Now, obviously, technology has changed, and technology now empowers sort of old wine to be put in bottles that are characterized by higher velocity, higher volume, and a greater variety. And we've seen this from goodness knows how many campaigns, from the 2016 US election to the weaponizing of migration campaign, to the anti-vax campaigns that came out of Russia with the COVID pandemic and so on. We have to realize that it's only going to get worse as generative AI improves, and it's going to get more easily accessible to even to ancient people like yourself. But nevertheless, there's a strong case for looking back, for taking some of the older lessons on board, understanding that it's a key feature of conflict, thinking systematically about what it looks like in its modern variant, and considering it to be a key weapon in the ideological fight that we should wield as well. With that, I'll be quiet.
Thank you for that introduction. Daniel, I come to you now. I mean, is the EU ready to face all this? Subversion, hybrid threats. The minister talked about collective responses, probably necessary in this time and age as he just described. We should see the big picture. But there's like a tension within the EU itself, because some would advocate for a more, let's say, collective view of intelligence, threats and intelligence data. And then there's always a question, but defense is a national, it has to do with national jurisdiction. So what is your take on that? Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
To respond to this, you gave me, 3 minutes? Or? This is a difficult question, but first of all, I would like to thank Kyriakos for the invitation that I accepted first because of the topic, that because when we were national directors of our security and intelligence service, we had exceptional cooperation, which I appreciated. So to this question, and Mr. Ambassador Serrano mentioned it, the EU has been active on the topic for a long time. The Commission and other entities, I would say that a very important moment is the strategic compass, where finally the EU understood it was an actor in terms of security too, a global actor, that's what I like to think, and proposed some answers on hybrid. The ambassador mentioned the hybrid toolbox, the hybrid response teams, which means that the EU is at the front line in fighting the hybrid threats, starting, as he said, Moldova, Armenia, and maybe tomorrow Montenegro and other places, including some member states, as we have election. We had election recently in Bulgaria, and we'll have next year a huge amount of election, and we expect a lot of attack coming from Russia, among others. And obviously at the INSEN we have the hybrid fusion cell, which is one of the best tools we have in the EU to understand the threat and to have a clear picture of the threat. But now, talking about intelligence. I was in a similar event in Tallinn this weekend, the security conference, with other fellow directors. And actually, they reminded me and they said, but Daniel, you know, we don't, in our services, we don't mention hybrid. And as my predecessor said, it's, those activities are well known to the services for a long, long time, especially the one that used to come from behind the Iron Curtain, and it's still coming from the same place. So there is a deep understanding of that threat from the services, but not necessarily using the same terminology. And as you mentioned, and I will now concentrate on intelligence because there is a lot of exceptional tools in the EU, in the academia, in the private sector to tackle the issue. So intelligence is only a small piece of it. So intelligence has never been the main tools of any government in our capitals. It's even less the case in the EU. But still, it has a specificity to intelligence more than ever. So traditionally, the hybrid criminal cell is working at the expert level with all the other institutions, the galaxy of institutions of the European Union. What we are trying to do now over the last year is to bring that intelligence to the decision makers. Mm-hmm. As the EU is a global power, the decision makers have to have that additional element to make the right decision, starting with the High Representative and Vice President of the Commission, Mrs. Kaja Kallas, starting then the Commission itself, and you know that there is a new project that started in April last year, the so-called Security College, which means that in a bunker, secured, we are briefing the commissioners and president of the Commission, and we started to brief the president of the Council, which until recently, even if he was heading the meetings of the head of states, did not get intelligence. And one important moment we started a few months ago is that we are briefing the ministers of foreign affairs, the ministers of defense, justice and home affairs, and other format. Why I'm saying this? Because actually all the briefing, when we started this to bring intelligence to the decision makers, it was all about hybrid. So obviously, as INSEN, we couldn't, any ministers in the room was much more briefed by their own services on the issue, but we were able to give a common view of intelligence to all of them. One example, what Belarus is doing towards some Baltic countries, for example, from Lithuania, could be seen by certain Mediterranean country as trafficking of cigarettes with those balloons. It is perceived by Lithuania, for example, as state terrorism, and for a lot of reasons. So we're able to give that common point of view. And as you mentioned, it's a huge issue. First of all, national security is the remit of the member states. So contribution in terms of intelligence are coming from the member states, but which does not mean that we cannot have an impact. First, by the briefing done by INSEN and services now coming to Brussels to give the briefing. But there is a lot more we can do. And since, and I will finish with this, the ambassadors mentioned it, sanctions, to fight those threats. If the EU can do something to fight those threats, there is different elements. So if we talk about Ukraine, it's obviously political support, financial support, support in terms of armament. But sanctions are one of the main tools that the EU can use to fight the threat. And actually, it's very, very efficient, especially since now, a few months back, we are bringing intelligence in the sanctions team to deeply hurt, in that case, Russia or other actors. And we can confirm that it has a huge impact on Russia.
Thank you very much. Quite informative. Jonathan, coming to you now. I mean, the EU is not really a security provider, at least not yet. But it is facing all these problems and dilemmas, and is, as Daniel was saying, is trying to do something about it. Now, Britain, can it contribute to this kind of efforts by the EU? Because obviously there is talk about Britain contributing to a European security architecture, and a lot of people would say that it doesn't make sense without Britain in any case. And we've also mentioned Russia, and obviously that extends to what is going on in Ukraine. So what is your view on what has already been discussed? How is London viewing these kind of threats?
Thank you very much indeed. And it's a great pleasure to be here in an event with Cyprus. You may not know this, but my first posting as a young diplomat 27 years ago was to Cyprus, and I've never lost either my appreciation of the strategic importance for Europe and for all of us, but also some very enduring personal relationships and affection for Cyprus goes through my career. And I'm really pleased that we're putting more focus on this issue. We have to. I see it's a fundamental part of the Cypriot presidency. And the reason is very simple. The threat's increasing. And I was looking at some statistics earlier today in preparation, and I see that MI5 have found a 35% increase year on year on investigations related to the state threat in the United Kingdom. So it is an increasing threat that we face. The other thing, I think, my first point, I think, as we start, therefore, as governments thinking what we do about this, the words hybrid threat can be very broad. They can mean many different things to different people. And the spectrum of what a hybrid threat is can go all the way from the pure military. And the minister spoke about the little green men. We, of course, have a war in Europe going on at the moment. We are different militaries, and I won't say more in an open forum, but I'm thinking all the time about the sort of hybrid activity that might be the precursor of or undermine our defences in a war. And you go all the way through to social media. And along the way, it can touch cyber, it can touch sabotage, and many other forms. And so I think one of the things that we can therefore do sometimes as governments, as we sort of grapple with what is not a new problem, as Huw has said, but as it's certainly much firmer on our radar, is to then sort of respond in a slightly siloed way. And the silos come in two ways. The first is through the tools. There's a cyber thing, so we'll get our cyber people to deal with it. Or there's a foreign information manipulation of information issue. Right, we'll get our FEMI people to deal with it. And the second thing we can do is say, this is for the military, and this is for the police, and this is for government. And if we do that, then I think we make our defences less effective, and we fail to properly bring the advantages of being joined up. So my first proposition, therefore, really is that we should look at each of the actors that we worry about, the adversaries that Daniel's group and others are identifying, and we should look at them holistically, because they're looking at us holistically. And we should think about all the things we can do, both to ensure our own resilience, but also counter the actions we're seeing, be proactive in countering them. So I did want to say a couple of words about the threat we face here, and then I will definitely answer your question rapidly. It is not one single country that is an issue here, and those of you who are following the UK news will know about links between Iran and some of the attacks we've seen recently in our Jewish communities. But the Russian threat is one, I think, that affects all of us across Europe. In May 2025, 6 members of a Russian spy ring who had carried out espionage activity on British and European soil were jailed for a total of more than 50 years. The ringleader had received his instructions from an intermediary from the Russian intelligence services. In April, the defense secretary here made a statement exposing Russian subsea activity. Poland attributed a railway explosion in November 25 to proxies working on behalf of the Russian intelligence services. So we must collectively continue to call this out and talk about it, but we must also act and hold accountable. And I think when we do that together, we are much stronger, and we also reduce the risk to individual countries. And the place where we've all worked together is Moldova in recent months. So turning then to your specific question, I mean, I would say that the UK sees itself and believes itself to be at the heart of European defence and security. Of course, we're not in the European Union. We are a key member of NATO. We also have really important relationships across the different parts of the European and the Euro-Atlantic security architecture. We have a really good relationship with our EU colleagues, and I'm actually told that just this week we've got colleagues from EEAS over here in London talking about hybrid threats, talking about escalation management. We have the the Security Defence Partnership. We have a specific UK-EU counter-hybrid strategic collaboration as well. So we are absolutely determined and committed, and I go around various member states and non-member states talking about what we must do together to tackle this threat. And it's absolutely clear to me that we must do that collectively.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Turning now to Nicholas, I mean, we've heard of what the European Union is trying to do, and obviously Cyprus is a member of the EU and belongs to this kind of, let's say, design of security and intelligence and so on and so forth. Plus, there is some kind of special relationship between Cyprus and Britain. The British bases are there. We had a few scares in the last few months relating to the existence of the British bases on the island. And that brings me to a very specific question I want to ask you. Is Cyprus looking to the east as well for intelligence cooperation, of counteracting hybrid threats? Because we are in a region that geographically is in the heart of turmoil, in the heart of hot conflict. You can't get hotter than that at this point in time, with the exception of Ukraine in our neighborhood. So how is Cyprus doing on that front?
Thank you, Anna. That is a very good question. It's a great pleasure to be here among friends and colleagues. So we're not unfamiliar with hybrid threats as Cyprus. We have been exposed to and been on the receiving end of hybrid threats for decades now. Perhaps we didn't call them hybrid threats back in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. But we have had our good share of dealing with hybrid threats, primarily from a single actor, that is Turkey. But this is not the case anymore. We've had significant additions to the security landscape and the threat landscape of Cyprus, especially over the last 20 years or so. So the power of hybrid threats lies exactly in the fact that it does not only concern the use of one single instrument of power, but multiple instruments of power are used at the same time across time and domain. And we've had our fair share of experience on that. So the occupation of the northern third of Cyprus by Turkey is pretty much a straightforward security challenge and a threat. But the occupation of the northern part of Cyprus by Turkey is something which provides Turkey the physical platform to apply hybrid pressure to the rest of Cyprus as well, and more broadly into the region. It's not only about Cyprus only anymore, but it's also part of Turkey's regional strategy in projecting and using hybrid power and hybrid force. But what I think is perhaps analytically underappreciated, and I think it's important for this discussion, is that the occupied northern part is a physical platform for Turkey for the incubation, also the projection of hybrid force. So Turkey is pretty much straightforward. There's no need to do a deep dive. But Cyprus' accession into the EU in 2004, the deepening of the relationships of Cyprus with key Western partners and also regional actors, the presence of strategic and also military interests of Western countries, including the UK, on the island. All these elements have gradually but very substantially led to a very deep transformation of our security landscape over the past at least 20 years. So this expanded the spectrum of threats that we're facing, with the addition of other actors as well, both state, non-state, and also quasi-state actors. We've had to deal with disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, and other forms of malign activity in Cyprus from actors other than Turkey.
Such as?
Such as, I don't think that is relevant to this conversation, but we're part of the EU, and we align ourselves.
Daniel,
No, this is a relevant question. It's always relevant.
please.
Attributing, no, of course. Of course, attribution is one of the elements that we have to bear into consideration very carefully. So we're part of the EU. We're parts of a group of member states that participate in drafting the threat analysis and also the strategic compass, our diplomats, colleagues. So we're parts of a common assessment of who the hybrid threat actors are. So this includes Russia, this includes Iran. This includes the threat actors that we've been facing activity from in Cyprus as well. I think this is important also for the discussion to refer to how flexible we've proved ourselves to be in addressing these threats. Because as a small state, we have had to adjust. We've had to adapt to adverse conditions very fast. And this comes as an advantage of being a small state, is that we're more swift in changing, in adapting, in coming to terms with difficult realities. And I think we've done a good job. We've come a long way over the past years. Coming to your question, is Cyprus looking more to the east? The single-worded answer is no. We're looking both to the west and to the east. As Cyprus, we maintain, or we have seen to it that we maintain channels of communication with everyone. Of course, it goes without saying with our European partners. This is a structured cooperation, it's a permanent cooperation, it's part of our daily activity. But we are situated in a geography that requires from us to have all-weather channels of communication and engagement with our regional partners as well. We cannot do this only by being in Brussels. We have to be in Brussels, we have to be in Berlin and in Paris, but at the same time, we have to be in Beirut, in Damascus, in Erbil or Baghdad. We have no luxury of being absent from a geography from which the main security threats of Cyprus come from. So we have been out there, we have exposed ourselves, especially over the last years, into a very specific kind of diplomacy, not using conventional means of diplomacy. We have embassies around the place, but a different kind of diplomacy, including security diplomacy and intelligence diplomacy, that is most meaningful when engaging these players and these actors to our east. That conventional diplomacy does not always resonate with them in the way that intelligence or security diplomacy resonates. It's more results-oriented and more substantial in content. And then there.
Yeah, but very recently, I've seen Politia hosted Dr. Marina Theodore, who is an American citizen of Cypriot origin, and she used to be the head of innovation at the Pentagon. And actually, she was sort of extrapolating what you're saying, that Cyprus, because we're talking about Cyprus now, as a small country, could be a very good case study. It could be a pilot for many AI technologies, defense experiments, quote unquote, security innovations, so on. So being a small state at this time and age of technology is not necessarily a bad thing. But now coming back to threats, because you promised me you would talk a little bit more about who is behind these threats, Daniel. And you did mention in your opening statement about the interlaps between internal security and external security, and how drug smuggling and people smuggling and all kind of possible terrorist activities, they're all really interlinked. And you can't see them in silence, as Jonathan was just saying. Does INCENT identify non-state actors as very important? Or is there always a state behind these activities? Because as far as terrorism is concerned, my take is always, chercher l'État, look for the state. It was very fashionable at some point to talk about non-state actors. But is it really the case? What does your experience
So very often we concentrate on state actors, obviously, but it's not the only phenomenon. And again, when you look at the huge number of excellent entities that can fight different threats, we have a tendency to concentrate on intelligence. And very often, and now if we look at the European Union as a union, we can see that all the main actors, and not only the malicious actors, have one point in common, is they want a divided European Union. And unfortunately, it's not so difficult to succeed in this. So there is, the number of challenges or threats we have to tackle is quite big. And again, since we are working only with, mainly with security and intelligence services, there is a specificity to it. Is that when you look at all the state institutions that do interact in Brussels from the member states, they are all similar or the same. Any Ministry of Defense or Foreign Affairs, sometimes the scale is different, the size, the remit is a bit different, but they're always very similar. The services, they're all different. They are all the 27 different legal framework, different remits. When we talk about security services, some of them have police authority, some of them not. So it's a complicated crowd, and we want to make the best of it. And what is extremely important, and that's why actually the example of the Cyprus Security and Intelligence Service is an extremely good one. With the number of the threats we have nowadays, the complexity of the threats, even the biggest services in the world have a difficulty to tackle everything. And actually our advantages in that community is we have services that are extremely good at the specific topic they work on. So geographically, Cyprus has a huge importance in I always, as you know, gladly invite the Cyprus service to come to us and give us a lot of in-depth element you discussed now. But what we want to do is obviously do more than the EU environment. And since I'm in the UK, I must say that we are very keen on expanding the cooperation with the British intelligence and security services. And since, the main threat remains Russia, obviously, and starting with the the war that for Russia, the brutal aggression that Russia started in February 2022, the UK, from day one, have been heavily implicated in all this, in defending Ukraine, and through the defense of Ukraine, actually defending Europe. So that's why talking about specificities of our community and strength of all our partners, the UK has potentially a key role to play.
So UK, over to you then. But I want to just add a little bit more on that. Nicholas mentioned bilateral relations. You mentioned bilateral relations before, and of course the EU-UK defense agreement. What about our friends over the pond? What's going on with the transatlantic relations and NATO? And how does that sort of complement or not what the UK and the EU see as the way forward in terms of security architecture in Europe?
What a question. So let me answer that in a couple of ways. I mean, the first thing is, and when you ask in the sort of bluntest form of that question, the key thing I think we've seen at the NATO summit last year and in the communications from the American administration is an absolute clarity over the importance and the reality of Article 5 of NATO and of collective self-defense. And that is crucial to deterrence, of course, of our adversaries. But the second thing I'd say, though, is that it is no secret that the current administration, and I don't think this is only the current administration, is looking to rebalance and is looking for Europe to step up and take more responsibility for our own security. And frankly, thirdly, that is a conclusion that I think all of us as countries in Europe have independently reached ourselves, right? The security dynamic, the situation we are in, has changed enormously over the last decade. And in particularly since, as Daniel's pointed out, the brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine. And the implications that might flow from that of a large Russian military, the Russian government is currently diverting huge amounts of money into arms, into its defense industry, losing hundreds of thousands of soldiers as well. And the implications that I think are for us to have to handle for many years, and that is going to require a different approach to deterrence. So if I can use that as a sort of framing conversation, I think the key is that whilst maintaining those close relationships with our American friends, we are also building a strong set of military capabilities, security capabilities, which we can operate together across the continent of Europe to ensure our own individual and collective self-defense.
Crystal clear. Huw, coming over to you now. I mean, we've been saying this, everybody I think was agreed to your original position that this is not something new. Maybe we would call it hybrid threats, but perversion, it has always, subversion has always all been there. And I was just looking at the CIA director visiting Cuba, all these interesting case studies we have of what the CIA was trying to do in Cuba in the past. I'm sure you're studying all those very carefully. But it was not what has changed, because at the same time we're saying this is old, but this is new. So what is technology bringing on the table which did not exist before?
Well, it's a massive question, isn't it? I mean, I think you can sum it up shortly. I think technology is accelerating. It's an accelerant on all things. It is sort of democratizing it in a way. So the barriers to entry are much lower. It costs more or less nothing to do things that in the past would have taken lots of time and cost lots of money. And it allows for very, very rapid diversification and testing and adaptation of things that work and don't work. And you can sort of have a Darwinian subversive or a hybrid dynamic with the technology that is available for us all today. So it's and it's only going to get worse, obviously, because as our interaction with technology evolves and as we sort of mediate how we learn through about the outside world in new and different ways, for example, large language models, the opportunities for hostile actors to sort of manipulate that very, very far upstream only increase. And so we have a big kind of looming problem coming, as well as the current problem that we have of volume, velocity, and sort of variety.
But do you think that allows a host of new actors to enter the arena of playing games, political games? Was technology allow that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's open doors, democratized. This is the great thing and the big downside of the environment in which we live. And of course, it makes the problem of doing anything about it much more difficult. A, because states can't operate at the same speed, and B, because you have to mediate whatever you do via some technology company that might not share your values and might not listen to your policies. So it's a very difficult problem, and I don't envy people who actually have to deal with it on a day-by-day basis.
Allow me to take questions. I'll take questions from the floor, and then I'll give you some time to do like a closing in the end. Do we have any questions from the audience or comments? Yes, Ambassador Rafti, the lady there, and there was at the back. Yeah. Yes, the gentleman there. Okay, Tully. Okay, we've got 4 questions, but please be very, very brief because we're running out of time. Elena.
Thank you all for your insightful presentations. I'd like to pick up on something that Anna mentioned in the beginning about polarized societies and difficulties you face. And I want to talk a little bit about the intergenerational justice perhaps in the EU, because we see young people being targets and vectors often of this kind of activity. So from a security perspective, perhaps what can we do? Can we communicate better what it is that we are trying to do? Because there's a lot of questioning of things by people, and we're not always able to reach. These unfortunately are targets of activity. And if you're having one point, how is that hybrid activity in Cyprus, just to make it clear that in Cyprus the targets of hybrid activities are all the communities. So just to make it clear that Turkey is pressing all Cypriots, also the Cypriot citizens in the occupied area, so they are also targets of hybrid threat. I think this is important also to mention.
Thank you. The lady at the back. Could you please identify yourself as well?
Yes, my name is Miriam. I was a researcher in private children as school. And my question is for Nicholas and for concerns for the therapists Cyprus to place a targeted aggressive information warfare campaign. And we've seen from what's happened in Ukraine that the strength of the ability to counter Russian disinformation narratives has been partly attributed to the strength of their civil society institutions. So how prepared would you say is Cyprus civil society to counter a targeted and aggressive disinformation campaign? Thank you.
Okay, then we've got 2 questions there and there.
This is a question. My name is Christoph Meyer. I'm a professor of the European International Politics at King's College London. You mentioned the use of intelligence to better target EU sanctions, which I think is a very important topic after the 20th sanction package to make them more effective. To what extent have member states shifted their attitudes towards EU intelligence sharing? Because I think in the past they've often not wanted the Commission to be on board. The Commission talked about having its own cells. So how can we get to genuinely share all sorts information intelligence in the EU system when in the past member states didn't really want that to happen? Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Mason Emergence with Politico. I guess it's more one for Jonathan and Nicholas. Following the attack on British bases in Cyprus, what effect has that had on the security relationship between the two countries?
Okay. Nicholas, we'll start with you. Huw, I would ask you if you could respond to the young generation social media. Nicholas, the question was directed to you specifically by the lady there, and then you've got sanctions and relations between Cyprus and Britain. So Nicholas, over to you.
Yeah, perhaps if you could, because I didn't pick it up very well. Perhaps you could repeat it if that's okay.
Only because it says refrain from quite connection with the for following benefits with darkness of society. Crisis, strong capital, with the in the face of the potential the strongest artist.
Good. So I think we've come a long way as a Cypriot society to shield ourselves from disinformation campaigns, regardless where they come from, regardless if they come from Turkey or Russia or from other actors. We've made sure that we reach out as the security structures of the Republic. We reached out to the private sector, to schools, and other pillars of the Cypriot society to make sure that we emphasize the danger and the risks of being exposed to foreign disinformation, and how to have a proper filter when being exposed to disinformation campaigns. Of course, we still have some way to go, and it's a dynamic environment, and it's always shifting. But I think we've achieved a whole lot over the past years or so. This comes also, being a small state. It's a certain advantage that comes with being a small state. We adjust fast, and we make sure that best practices and know-how, that we also make sure that we are in constant communication with partners, both on the bilateral level and also with EU partners, that we make sure that we absorb this best practices and lessons learned from other examples. I'll pick up the question on the Republic of Cyprus and the UK relationship and the aftermath of the strike on Krotiri. Perhaps a more conventional diplomat can answer this first, and then
I'd prefer you to go first.
Thank you. So both London and Nicosia acknowledged the fact that we need to enhance, we need to better our engagement on security issues. Obviously, the British bases are the very existence of British bases is an inherent characteristic of the security environment of Cyprus. Regardless of the public sentiment that surrounds the bases, there's also an inherent characteristic of the very existence of the bases. But we both acknowledge that we need to make sure that we have constant and uninterrupted and all-weather lines of communication when it comes to incoming security threats. And I think we're on the same page. I know we're on the same page on this. And the prospects are much more positive in this direction.
Gentlemen, we 5 minutes past our time limit, so you have to be brief. Jonathan, I'll be to you.
Do to pick up from that? Well,
Yes.
so the very quick way of saying this is I agree. That there have been for many years now, I think, some really clear liaison coordination on the islands between the SBAs and the Cypriot authorities. What I think we identified this year is the need to build up even more our strategic dialogue at political level, the lines of communication at this point. Obviously, the UK is also playing a protective role with protective presence of forces in the region, in what is a complex region, and Nicholas has described a very complex threat environment, multi-actor threat environment, and Cyprus's geography is also plain to see anybody looking at a map. So there are factors that at times can raise risk levels. There are ongoing complexities in the hybrid threat space. And I think the commitment from the UK is absolutely to continue to increase and deepen our collaboration on these issues. And that is it's really important to us that we do.
Daniel?
So, intelligence cooperation in the EU environment is an incredibly difficult endeavor. There is no doubt. But first of all, we have to change the mentality. Actually, in the same town, there is another organization called NATO, where there is intelligence, where it's normal to work in sometimes a secret environment, protected environments. So, without ever copying NATO, there is things we can learn. To change a bit for some question the perfect transparency of EU institutions for specific topics. And while working at the expert level, develop maybe other ways of getting intelligence. As I said, national security is the remit of the member states. So intelligence cooperation is not necessarily linked for the member states to the EU institution. And anyhow, for a service, cooperation is, at the most with one other services, and that's the maximum. If you have more in one room, it's already mentally difficult for my colleagues to work, but still. And then what we are doing in the meantime is bringing specific services, and that's why I mentioned Cyprus, to bring their specific knowledge to the decision makers, because I mentioned earlier if all different global actors they are interested to divide the European Union, and as I said, very often they succeed. And the first victim of a divided European Union is intelligence sharing, obviously. And we've seen that over the last few years on the support of Ukraine. All the obstacles we had to have waiting for a specific election, maybe to change the way we can go forward. So we take that into account, but I already see in Brussels a shift. We have new bunkers, so it's even the physical part is important. The idea of people going into a bunker without a phone was a difficult thing to do at the start, which, for me, coming from intelligence security service was perfectly normal at the national level. So we are changing a bit the mentalities. And again, for now, the most, I would say, impactful intelligence we get is services coming directly to talk to the decision makers.
Thank you. Huw, any hope with the young ones?
There's always hope with the young ones. I think the question points to a key vulnerability in their society, and these vulnerabilities, these kind of social cleavages, will always be targeted by hostile actors who want to create wedges in society that exploit those wedges, as we've been discussing. I think that the solution is obviously very difficult because it's a social and political solution, not a kind of intelligence or a sort of operational solution. Fundamentally, it'll involve having to build the politics that works for everybody, where young people feel that they have a future. Developing that is obviously going to take educational, political, social, as well as technological and intelligence-based solutions and operations. So it's a big problem that will be hard to solve, and that will be constantly attacked by people who want to make problems worse rather than better.
And on this note, so we have to close this discussion. We're running out of time. There's a coffee break now, so you can have any questions you may want, I think, quickly with the speakers while having coffee. Thank you very much.